Welcome to Friday's Digest, Season 1, Episode 8. Today we're going to discuss how I failed and wouldn't change a thing. That's a bold statement, right? We're going to start with story time. I'm going to talk about a failure story of mine. And then we're going to dive in the take-home messages from these failure stories and many others I have. The first one will be how you can turn failure into an opportunity. Second one will be about the difference between passive learning and active learning. Third one will be how almost succeeding will teach you much more than almost failing. And finally, we're going to talk about how to go for the impossible. Okay, let's start with story time. A little bit of background. I started dental school when I was 24 and I started medical school at the age of 39. Okay, 39. Now, I'm not going to bore you with all the details of my academic training, but I do want to point out that back then, dental students and medical students studied the first 3 years together with an almost identical syllabus. So when I got accepted into medical school at the age of 39, I went directly into the clinical years. And at the age of 40, I decided to take the USMLE. So what is the USMLE? The USMLE, or the United States Medical Licensure Exam, it's actually a set of 3 exams or steps. These steps are necessary to obtain a medical license in the US, to have a United States MD. Step 1 is the hardest of the 3. Step 1 tests all the basic science knowledge. So if I took all the exams of my dental school together with medical students in 2004 and 2005 and 2006, that test, the step 1 of the USMLE, is a test on something I studied 15 years ago. Okay? Now, I had 2 months between semesters, so I decided, okay, let's just take some time off between semesters, use my vacation, and take the step 1. I did some reading online, and then I started to realize, okay, that's an impossible task. Medical students have 2 years to study for it, and I'm trying to do it in 2 months. So I did learn this material before in the past, but as I mentioned, it was 15 years ago, and 15 years is enough time to forget it all. But I decided to sign up for the exam, and I bought a book and I purchased an online source to practice for the exam. And of these 2 months, I used the first months to read the book or freshen my memory for what I learned 15 years ago. I was so naive doing that. Then, after the first months, I took the first practice test online, and my grade 37. 37% of the answers I got right. 37. Is that even a grade? I googled to see if I could find someone, just one person who got 37% while practicing for the USMLE and eventually passed the real test. Okay, I just looked for one person, one example, but none. I didn't find a single post, a single internet site, nothing, nada. My online search also made me realize that I should finish all the practice tests and start reviewing at this point. Get it? It's 1 month I have before the exam. It's actually a little bit less than 1 month. It was 28 days before the exam, and I took my first practice test. And at that point, I should have been after completing all the practice tests. What? I just started practicing my first 40 questions. I got 37%, okay? And I still have 3,660 questions to go. 3,660 questions to go before I complete my practice. That was terrible. So I practiced and practiced, test after test after test. 37, 37. That was my most common grade while studying for the USMLE for the first time, 37%. Just imagine my self-esteem, or what was left of it, and just imagine my confidence, which was terrible at that time, when I saw that number 37 over and over again on the screen. I studied and failed, failed and studied over and over again, day in and day out, practiced and practiced and failed and failed and failed. At first, it nearly broke me. I've never been in a state of failing so many times in such a short period of time. Now, I did fail in the past, but over and over again, every single day, again and again and again. Just think, failing hundreds of times in just a few weeks. But then something started to change. Now, I'm not talking about the grades. The grades remain the same. Those terrible grades of 35% to 42%, these were my grades. The grades remained the same. But something else started to change. With time, it hardened me. I began to see 37% as an opportunity to learn 63% new things. 63% ways of becoming a better doctor. And then I took the real test. The real step one that you sit in a classroom in front of a computer and answer the questions. And I remember leaving the test room after straight 8 hours of a test. That's a very difficult test, okay? 8 hours straight. And I felt like a different person. I felt like a year had passed since I started studying, but actually it's only been 28 days. I'm not counting the whole 2 months because the first month was a complete waste of time. I'm going to touch on that shortly. So 28 days of real studying for the test, and it felt like a year. And you know what? I felt proud. I acquired a huge amount of knowledge and mental resilience. I realized that my repetitive failures allowed me to grow, and fast. Now, you probably expect me to say, and I passed the test. Well, no, I haven't. 3 weeks later, after taking this test, I got the grade, and I failed. Now, let's take what I learned in this journey and summarize it to 4 or 5 lessons. First lesson. Although I failed, I felt like it was my greatest hour. It was my most significant intellectual challenge, and I stuck through it. Now, I ended up repeating the test, the step 1 test, a few months later, and eventually I passed it. If I try to remember right now the day that I passed the test, I can't even remember it. I don't even remember the joy after passing step 1. And I'm not relating me passing step 1 on my second try as any meaningful experience. But when I go back and remember my first try taking the step 1, the try that I failed, I can vividly remember my walk to the car after failing the test, with my head held high, feeling proud. So take home message, you can take the failure and turn it into an opportunity. That will get you places where success never will. If I would have passed step 1 or the first try, I wouldn't remember all these lessons of trying so hard and having such an intellectual challenge. I would just forget it. And all the lessons I learned, and I'm going to tell you about these lessons shortly, I wouldn't have remembered them all if I would have passed the test. Turning this failure into an opportunity, like recording this podcast about failure, is just because I failed step 1. If I would have passed it, there was nothing to teach, nothing to tell. Second lesson. Let's touch the amount of time that I devoted to studying for the USMLE Step 1. As I mentioned before, the total amount of time was 2 months, but actually I really studied for 28 days. 1 month was the amount of time I wasted on passive learning. That was my first month. I actually read the USMLE book. I watched pathology lectures and I tried to read an obscene amount of flashcards made by others. That was a total waste of time. It was the equivalent of cleaning the windows of your house when it's on fire. I wasted a full month on passive learning. And 28 days was the actual time I studied for Step 1. And those 28 days were all active learning, not passive, like watching videos or reading a book. Active learning. I practiced questions, I learned from my mistakes, and I used spaced repetitions. Now, I've been a teacher for more than 25 years. I have more than 20,000 teaching hours and a few thousands of students. I tried every single method possible and I mentored students at every level possible. But active learning is the only way to go. By active learning, I mean asking yourself questions. The best way to do it is by using flashcards and using the principle of spaced repetitions. Now, I prepared a whole issue about it. You can click the description below and get all these links, but in short, if you just sit in front of a screen and you highlight in your book or read a book or listen to a lecture, you won't get all the advantages of active learning, of trying to answer questions. And if you don't repeat the studying process over and over again, if you don't ask yourself these questions over and over again, you will retain almost nothing. After a day, a week, a month, you will forget it all. And only by using the active learning methods and spaced repetition was I able to really comprehend the information. And when I took Step 1 again, and then I took Step 2 and Step 3, these methods allowed me to pass the tests with very nice grades. But more important than that, I was able to continue and remember everything I learned for years afterwards. And if I would have passed Step 1 on my first try, I guess I would never use these active methods of learning. And this failure has made me a better doctor. And again, if you want to read more about these methods, you can read about it in the issue I devoted to how I study. Next lesson. 5 questions is what separated me from passing the test. Only 5 questions separated me from passing Step 1 on the first try. This test has 280 questions total, 280. And come to think of it, I squeezed 2 years of med school into 28 days, and I almost made it. Looking back, I thought everything was lost while it was very much possible. Just 5 more correct answers and I would have passed Step 1 on the first try. Looking back, I thought everything was lost while it was very much possible. Bottom line here, you can never know how things will turn out. You can never know. You just need to keep going. No matter how grim it may seem, no matter how bad things look, you need to keep going. You can never know how close you are to succeed, even when everything seems lost. And this lesson sticks with me every single day when I'm studying, when I'm in the OR, when I'm in clinic, when I'm with my students, when I'm repeating experiments. This lesson sticks. It's with me every single day. you can never know how close you are to success. Take home message. You will learn more by almost succeeding than by almost failing. Think about it. I almost failed. Wow, yes, I passed the test. What did I learn? Nothing. But if I almost succeeded, now I have to work harder. Now I have to try again. I learned something. Last lesson. Suppose you would ask me if you could go back in time and pass step 1 on your first try. Would you do it? My answer is absolutely not. Not a chance. I would have failed it over and over again just to learn what I learned. My mental toughness, which was, pretty above average to begin with, that mental toughness has reached heights I never thought were possible. I tried to achieve an impossible goal, or at least I thought it was impossible, and I found out later that it was within reach. That experience had made me a better teacher, a better surgeon, a better scientist, and a better father. I witnessed my true abilities by failing this so-called impossible task. And my take-home message here, just go out there and fail something. Fail something great. Go for the impossible. And when you do that, you'll find great things along the way. That's today's podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. Have a great weekend. I'll see you in the next one.